Okay, now that I've done my outline, I'm assessing it and I can see that I've made some mistakes, some places that I'm not really happy with, maybe the thickness of the line, or maybe perhaps I didn't join properly or I overstepped. And so one of the things that I'm going to do here is just lightly touch the ink here, just to make sure that if I place my hand on it, I'm not going to mess up. But I'm going to, right at this point, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so I've touched the surface here to make sure that it's dry. And I've zoomed the camera in so that you can see. There's a little tiny wobble right in here where I would like to get rid of it in the actual ink part of it. So before I go any further, I'm going to eliminate that. And I want to just show you, this is an X-Acto knife, and this particular blade is not your standard blade, but it's called a number 16 blade. It's made by the company X-Acto. And I particularly like this this blade because it really helps when I'm trying to fix a mistake. And so one of the things that you're going to do is it has this, even though it's on an angle, it does have this fairly flat edge that you can use. And when I put this on the surface of the paper, I'm actually going to be putting this side completely flat on the paper, and I'm going to scrape towards myself. And so let's try it. Okay, so there I've eliminated that little mistake that I made. Let's see if there's any other place where I can look and say, all right, well, I wish that I had done this a little bit better. Okay, so here, this line is kind of wobbly, and I'm going to just kind of see if I can't get it to thin out a little bit and sharpen up. If you go back and forth, you run the risk of damaging the paper or cutting it. And so that's one of the reasons why you get it flat and you scrape towards yourself or away from yourself. I sort of do this in the same way that I ink. I find it much easier to pull towards myself than away from myself. So let's see, okay, possibly down in here. I made this a little fat. And on the interior, also, I can come in and just shave a little bit of that away. Okay, the other thing that I'd like to address at this point in time, because I know that it's devastating to artists and there's a lot of fear involved when you're working in pen and ink, is what do you do when you have something like this happen? You know, you get a blob of ink down in the middle of your paper. You know, what do you do? How do you handle this? The main thing is to kind of freak out, and most people do freak out, but let's deal with it. Let's take care of it right now. Here's where Bounty paper towel really is one of the things that can become your best friend in the studio. One of the initial things is when this happens, the first thing is to just take either paper towel or rag or anything and just blot it, get it up as fast as possible. But that is really one of the last things that you want to do. It's not so bad on the Mylar, but if you're working on paper, this could be really a problem, because what you're doing is that you're putting the pressure of the weight of your hand of blotting. You know, as you're blotting, you're actually pressing part of the ink into the surface. So this would also help you if you spilled watercolor or any kind of liquid onto your drawing substrate. And all I'm going to do is just take the point of the paper towel and just place it, and as you can see, it will wick the ink, the excess ink. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get as much ink as you possibly can off of your paper without pushing it down into the paper. And so I just keep very gently placing this and letting it absorb up. Okay, so this is a lot lighter than it was before, and I'm now going to not touch it. It's one of the hardest things that artists have, is that, you know, oh my gosh, it's there, I've ruined my piece, I have to start all over again, what am I going to do? And that it's like almost like a pimple, you know, you just can't leave it alone, and the next thing you know, it's bigger and bigger and bigger, and you want to hide under the covers and never leave the house. So I find that if you can leave it alone and let it dry, we're actually going to use the same technique that we did to thin out some of the lines and the little mistakes that I've made. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to remove it. Okay, so now I've gotten this practically free of the ink that was sitting on the surface, and I'm going to again come in and scrape the surface. And I did this after it was dry. Okay, so again, I'm only scraping in one direction, and I like to scrape towards myself. It's a very light scraping. So I'm actually scraping, lifting up, scraping, and lifting up. And I don't want to do it too hard. I don't want to take too much of the Mylar off. But I also can come in with an eraser and see if I can't get a little bit more off. A lot of times people will try to use a pink pearl or a kneaded eraser. And when you're working on Mylar, a Mylar is a plastic. And so you really want to work with a plastic eraser. And as you can see, this is a click eraser. I got it at a local office supply store. And so it's really no big deal, but it is a plastic eraser. And as you can see, it's fairly dirty. And if I were to start erasing on here, I might end up with more of a mess. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in on a piece of scrap paper and just erase a little bit to get rid of any of the dirt that might be on the eraser. And now it's clean and ready to work with. All right, so what could have been a horrible disaster is now taken care of, and I'm home free.